Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Farah Nayeri. I'm a journalist based in London, and I write for the New York Times. I am here today with Jess Teutonico, who I'm about to introduce to you. But before I do, I thought I would tell you a little bit of a story about how her foundation came about. So in the early hours of the morning on September 11th, 2001, sort of very, very early in the morning, Nile Rodgers, the polymath, musician, composer, guitarist, and genius, and philanthropist, was landing in New York City from Seattle. He had gone to Seattle and he was flying back. It was a little bit of a turbulent landing just because of bad weather. And Nile basically went home, and he went into his kitchen, and his girlfriend had the TV on. And it was CNN, and he looked up, and he saw the World Trade Center with the North Tower, just like huge cloud of smoke billowing out of this, basically ravaged tower. And he stood there, and then after a little while, suddenly there was another plane, and there the plane was going into the South Tower. And so Nile was just sort of pinned to the floor, pinned to the TV screen. And all throughout that day, Nile, like so many other New Yorkers, received so many calls from artists, from friends, all over the place saying, "Are you okay, Nile? How are you doing? Are you okay? Are your loved ones okay?" And one person, he actually did lose a friend, a photographer, in the tragedy. But one of the people who called him on the phone said, "Nile, why don't you kickstart America's healing process after this terrible calamity by reviving your famous song, We Are Family," which you all, I'm sure, know. Which was written for Sister Sledge, of course, and it's about their family. But, the suggestion was, why don't we get a We Are Family song going to sort of make people heal? And so he did. He went and found, financing and producing facilities, and he got more than 200 celebrities, including Diana Ross, Queen Latifah, these kinds of people, John McEnroe, even the tennis man, to sort of join in this big chorus of "We Are Family," that sort of thing. Sorry about the voice. And there were even some firefighters in the chorus. And so this is how the We Are Family Foundation, which Jess is executive director of, was born. Before I turn to Jess, I also had to basically tell you a little bit about Nile Rodgers' childhood, because I think it's very important to describe to you the conditions in which he grew up. And he's written a wonderful book called Le Freak, right? It's his autobiography, came out a few years ago, and I actually had read it before coming here. And I called it up again, and Nile describes a childhood and an adolescence that was really very challenging. He basically describes his parents, in his own words, as junkies. He says basically that his mother Beverly was, I quote, "a beautiful, brilliant black girl," unquote. And basically she got pregnant with Nile when she was 13, meaning the first time that she ever had sex. And Bobby, Nile's stepfather, was, quote, "white, Jewish, and central casting handsome," close quotes. They were an extraordinarily creative and sort of intellectual couple, and they had, talented people, jazz musicians, unbelievable minds gathering in their home. But the living room where Nile grew up was also, he described it, a place where people were shooting, drinking, snorting, and smoking any and everything that was right in front of him. So this is the childhood that he had, and Nile Rodgers therefore grew up very fast. This little boy experienced life much earlier than the rest of us do. And so, Jess, first of all, welcome to this panel.
Thank you.
And I wanted you just to sort of talk to us a little bit about what the We Are Family Foundation is, given the Nile Rodgers background.
Yeah, I think I want to start with something rather than the what. I always like to talk about the why, right? In our community, we always try and introduce ourselves with why do you do what you do versus what do you do? And it's interesting because this most epic, famous song that I'm sure everyone in this room has danced to at weddings and danced to at bar mitzvahs and hears on the radio at airports has a meaning for you and has a meaning for Sister Sledge's family. But for the past 10 years, I live every day bringing this song to life through the beat of young people. So as you said, since we founded this organization after the atrocities of September 11th and the world needed to come together and needed healing, and we felt what a great way then by the power of music, it led us on this trajectory of, well, if we're going to make real change and we're going to make real impact, the only way to do that is through the power of this generation, right? So
the power of young people.
The power of young people. And in a lot of our programming, we ask during our summits with our young leaders, why do you do what we do? And as a team, when we asked ourselves the same question, and I bring this back, I couldn't answer the question why I do what I do. Why do I do what I do? Why am I so obsessed with this work? Why do I feel like it's not work? Why is it a purpose instead of a job? And my mom sent me this baby book she made for me like years after I was a baby. And she said, open to page 13. And I opened to page 13 and I saw that there was this letter I wrote when we had moved, when I was a young, preteen, to a new neighborhood. And I wrote this letter to the kids in the neighborhood and said, I'm moving here and I want to start a club and we're going to do good and we're going to raise money and we're going to have fun and give half our money away to great causes and we're going to use the rest of it to go travel, the city and do fun things. And I went on a very different path after that time, and I ended up in corporate America. And my mom always says to me, the person you were when you were a teenager is the person you usually turn out to be later on in life. And that's how you gravitate towards what you're passionate about and what you're serious about. And so you bring Nile's upbringing into this, and obviously growing up very fast and having a teenage mom and having to raise himself as a teenager. And I think him being so drawn to the power and the energy of a young person, and then all of us who work at the organization and with these young people understanding there's something here. So 10 years ago, working in corporate America, and I get this email from a friend and they say, there's this new mentor program, this new summit that works with teenagers around the world, and they're looking for 30 of them to bring in who are leaders and found solutions in their communities and beyond to help make the world a better place, and they're looking for mentors. And there's this one girl that they've selected from Kenya. And I have my own organization in Kenya, and so of course right away I saw the buzzword Kenya and I say, I have to do it. I know Kenya. I can help her get indoors. I can help teach her what she needs to know. Yes, count me in. And it's interesting because I think many of us have been in these positions where we insert what we think people need, and we insert what we think the world needs. And fast forward a year after we started working together, of course, the aha moment was, I'm learning more from her than she, I'm sure, is learning from me. And it really gave me this pause of, we're not working together in the right models anymore. We're still in this old school kind of conversation and thought of older generation teaching younger generation, older generation wisdom, knowledge, power, connections, younger generation naive and excited, but calm down. And what was interesting is from that moment on, something switched, and there started this whole trajectory of, I want to listen to young people, and I want to know how we can work collaboratively together.
It would be helpful to understand what the foundation does with young people, so if you could explain that.
Sure. So we scour the globe every year looking for young people from all different countries, all different socioeconomic backgrounds, all different walks of life who have found a solution or innovated a project or have an incredible idea to help further the advancement of positive change in this world, whether it's healthcare, education, the environment, bullying, any of those, hot buzzword topics that we're all trying to figure out how we're going to, be a part of in a positive way. And we have different programs where we bring them together, but I mean, the beautiful thing about the name of our foundation and the song in which we stand on is that the world needs to come together. And with that, everything that we do is bringing together the power of young people and harnessing change and galvanizing communities around them in order to prove to the world and show the world that we no longer need to operate in these silos of young people doing this. Isn't it great? Look, this 13-year-old just solved this problem. Forbes under 30. No, that's the wrong way we're looking at it. What we need to be doing is intermingling young ideas, young energy, with wisdom and experience and knowledge, and everybody having a seat at the same table.
Is it possible to have a few examples of these young people, these teenagers who have actually solved problems or come?
We were with Greta last week at the climate
Greta Thunberg,
strike.
in case you hadn't heard of
last year she sat alone. This year she sat with 4 million people. Abu, who came from Afghanistan and is now in New York, schooling in New York, at 19 in his own bedroom, taught himself artificial intelligence and now has one of the most effective and cost-effective ways to detect breast cancer that is taking over the healthcare system. Ciara Judge out of Ireland, who found a way to increase crop yields by 74%, which could essentially end global hunger as we know it. One more, Trisha Prabhu out of Chicago. Her app Rethink is reducing cyberbullying by 93% just by asking a simple question before you post on social media, are you sure you want to post this? These are small things, but these have big impact. And what's happening is young people are working in their bedrooms, in their silos, and that's how we all are behind our computer screens. But really what we need to do is uplift and surround with the power of community and intergenerational relationships and resources and not keep us separate.
Okay, so how do you find these youngsters?
Many different ways. We find them through, obviously, our coalition, which is made up of nonprofits and educators around the world who are eyes and ears on the ground, and of course, a small circle of our young people who know other young people who know other young people. And I think just, word of mouth at this point, it's a really small demographic, especially when you get out of the Western areas of the world where people under a certain age feel empowered and supported that they can actually make change. I don't like to talk in a generalized form because I come from New York, and our culture in New York is very much, if you haven't, had a business by the time you're 19, how are you going to get into school, which is awful. But there's other parts of the world that have just as much genius, if not more, that needs to be nurtured and cared for and connected to. So our biggest mission is really, we love going into the Western areas of the world, but the most important thing and critical thing we can do is spread awareness in the places that don't get the coverage and don't get the awareness.
Can we go back to this Abu? Just tell me a little bit about this Afghan boy who has come up with this free piece of AI, artificial intelligence, for breast cancer detection. How did you come across him?
Let's see, this was 2 years ago. My team and I, we also are very familiar with Google, as I'm sure everyone in this room can do that too. And you kind of go down these Google holes and find these stories. And a friend of mine was at the annual Google conference and said, there's this young boy that was highlighted, you've got to check this out. Sure enough, CEO brought him on stage for a short little clip about how he's using the technology that Google put out to make a difference. And I called him cold blank, on the phone and just said, I need to talk to you. And that's usually what happens because, like us all, we get into our own worlds of siloing with our computers and trying to figure out what to do, and we forget that there's a bigger community out there that we can tap into in more of a community-based analog style, which why conferences like this and gatherings like this are the most critical and important thing that any human can do.
There is also the issue of, of course we can be as adults very myopic and kind of think this person's not an adult and I shouldn't listen to them, which is what most people do. There's also, though, the danger and the risk that as governments become more and more reflective of populations and electorates, I realize that these young people don't have the vote yet, but we could have a day when governments would sort of start pandering to the young and sort of doing things that really will please them. Greta Thunberg is a very responsible, young person, but there could be young people in the future who, might dictate policy. Isn't there kind of like a danger of that happening?
I think like everything, it's a balance, right? I think what we're striving for and fighting for is more of an equilibrium with the power. I think, this is the first time in history, it's unprecedented that this generation, what they've bared the weight of and also have the capacity, unlike any other generation before, being digital natives and being able to have unlimited access to information before they even go to, middle school. So with that, I don't think it's about tapping power over to the other side. I think it's about, like I said, commingling, whether it's in the boardroom or if you're a CEO and you have positions that are leadership positions in government and in policy making, youth have to be represented at the table. They are our biggest population on the planet right now. If we're obsessed right now with diversity and equality and having women part of the table and having marginalized individuals part of the table, why would youth and younger generation not be a part of that conversation and that equation?
I'm going to ask one more, and then I will definitely be turning it over to you, very much hoping that we will have questions from you. If you know of young people who are coming up with extraordinary ideas, young people whose voice should be heard, examples in your entourage, we want to hear about it. But so my last question is, what do you think of Greta Thunberg?
She's incredible. The tenacity and just everything about her, what she's galvanized, again, with her peers and with the young people, and just in the year alone, is exactly why I sit on this stage and exactly why I've been doing what I've been doing for 10 years, because it's infectious. And whether she can get it done or not, the importance is people are starting to take notice in a different way. And I always... It's so important because I think everybody has a role to play, whether you're a young person, you're not a young person, you know a young person, it doesn't matter. There are ways that everybody can participate in elevating this conversation and impact. Number one, how many people in this room consider themselves to be a mentor? Right? Okay. And how many in this room consider themselves to have been mentored? Great. So mentoring is a huge thing right now. But again, we look at this relationship in this kind of old age, I call you, I need this, and then the person on the other end is like, okay, I'll help you with this. But I challenge everyone in this room and beyond, find someone who is completely the opposite age of you, whatever that might be, and have a collaborative mentoring relationship and teach each other as if it was something that you're both getting something from rather than expecting something just one way, and your world will change. Number two, for those who are in positions of power, like I said, boardroom, CEO, policy, government, whatever it may be, I implore you, find a seat for a younger person to be a part. If they can't have fiduciary responsibilities, give them an advisory spot and have them as advisors. And number three, if you are blown away by the work that this generation is doing like I am, talk to me, because they need experienced, amazing, intelligent, energetic people around them just as badly. It's a two-way street. So there's a lot of ways that we can really further the collaborativeness, and not just, in your own backyards, but, from New York to Kenya, from Istanbul to San Francisco. Really, especially in this polarized world that we're living in, the most important thing that we can do is make the gap smaller, and most importantly from the generation side is my standpoint on that.
So let's hear from you. Do I see any hands in the room? Yes, please. We have a young lady there. If you could introduce yourself, perhaps.
My name is Anka, and I work with, let's say, kids coming from underprivileged communities, from the Roma community, and there are a lot of talented kids there. What advice would you give me to help them promote themselves somehow, or at least find the power or find their hidden talents, and to be able to help themselves get out of these situations?
Yeah, excellent question. Also because they are facing might face discrimination of some kind.
I mean, again, the beauty of the internet is what it did is it gave everybody a safe space, not a lot of safe spaces, but it gave some safe spaces where people could learn from each other outside of their direct analog communities and feel that they're not alone. So my answer to that would be, one, connect to as many online resources and groups as possible from a peer-to-peer standpoint that they can see that other young people around the world have empowered themselves, and even if it's from low socioeconomic backgrounds, that's not a barrier anymore. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Number two, I would say, there used to be this amazing program called Chat the Planet. It was 2 decades ago. But what it did is it had cross-cultural conversations between young people, and that is something that, I'll always promote that till I'm blue in the face, because making sure that you understand there's a bigger world out there is really step one to understanding that that's the education that is going to change everything. Number three, I would also say there's a ton of programs that I'm happy to provide resources for that young people can get involved at the ground level and see their actual impacts, no matter if they're inventing cures for breast cancer or not. There's so many entries to get involved, and I would absolutely love to share them with you.
Well, can you share them with us, though? Like, what kind of programs?
So in Romania, you said they're based here. In Romania specifically, I don't know actual on-the-ground resources, but I can definitely look into it. But causes like DoSomething.org, where they can sign up and run their own drives, right?
DoSomething.org.
DoSomething.org. It's based out of the U.S., but it obviously is accessible on an international level. Obviously, We Are Family Foundation. We do open applications all year round in trainings, and events like this and like TED and TEDx's that I know pop up around the world that, always are looking for TED Youth events, having them meet other people that way. And I think just, again, contact me, and we have an open resource from 60 different countries of young people who are proving that no matter where you come from, anything is possible, and tapping into mentors and tapping into other companies that believe in the power of an education outside of the classroom.
So your web address is
wearefamilyfoundation.org. Yeah.
Wearefamilyfoundation.org. That would be a good place to start.
Yeah, for sure.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, ma'am. You need a microphone.
Congratulations on the work you're doing. You speak of...
Excuse me, can you kind of give us a sense of your name and where you're coming from?
Okay, my name is Diana. I'm Mexican. Not now, because I'm living in Romania for maybe 20 years. We did, like my family and I, and then it became a community thing. On Christmas Eve, we would pack lunches, and we would call them Christmas dinners, and then distributed them to people on the street that were living on the street. It was not meant to take them out of poverty, but it was just for that one night that we knew that we were going to be enjoying a nice Christmas dinner. We wanted to share that sentiment. But my question is, you speak of kids that are doing amazing projects. Do you have examples of kids that are doing really great projects? Not like Greta, not like Abby, something a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that there's a portion of the population that can strive for that kind of excellence, but a lot of kids might not be able to get there, and that doesn't mean that they're less interested in their cause.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think the point of entry that is important to explain too is it's not always, we're not looking for the Gretas that have to attain a certain status and have the press coverage. We're looking for those who have found their own solution or gone out on their own to start their own project. Some of the young people from our community are from the rural areas of Malawi, and they went against the taboo and started handing out sanitary pads to the 100 girls at their school down the street when it was like not possible. So something like that, it's not getting international attention, it's not getting national attention, but for that community and what they did, it was groundbreaking, and we recognize that.
And that was not possible because?
Just with the way that the stereotypical constraints of the government and policy and how, menstruation is viewed in that community, and, and there's many different reasons, but I think the importance is we're looking in this day and age in order to make real change, whether it's something small like handing out Christmas dinners or sanitary napkins or, 4 million climate strike, from a few days ago, I don't necessarily think the importance is the impact of how large. I think it starts with everybody and the ripple effect that it has. And this generation, more than any generation, understands that responsibility. We've, for generations, trusted power and trusted people in positions of power, and I think the internet did a lot to change that because we were able to research, for those who have access, or know that there's other ways to kind of circumvent the system, and that's what this generation did really well. So I think it starts with anything, right? It doesn't have to be a grand scale.
We had a few hands of people in the room who are actual mentors. Can I ask one of you, if you don't mind, to kind of tell us what kind of mentoring you do? Is that possible? Yes? You have your hand up. Are you a mentor? Please do talk to us.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Armina. I'm actually involved in a volunteer project that's called Edu Inc. And it mentors teachers actually in the public sector, and it gives them access to resources, or better said, we fund their projects. So just to give you an example, there's a teacher, a school teacher actually, who's using Lego WeDo type of robotics, and it's using those small robots for literature actually. And she wants to go into all of the villages around her city, and she does that. What we do is we mentor the teachers, not the kids, but there are also kids who are doing amazing jobs, like starting their own summer camps and building their own cottage somewhere in the mountains with their bare hands, and we also try to support them in that way. So
fantastic.
But I also have a question, if I
please
may.
go ahead. Go ahead.
How do we convince company leaders to give young people a seat at the table instead of trying to fit them into predefined structures? Thank you.
Such a powerful question, and one that we're continuing to try and figure out every day, because to create seismic shifts, it doesn't happen overnight. I think the response that this is not a new conversation. I think there are a lot of policymakers, and there are a lot of governments, and there are a lot of corporations that do understand the heartbeat of this generation and have included them, whether putting youth advisory boards, which again, further, in my opinion, further silos the conversation, but are already doing the work of understanding that this generation is not just a generation to be hired, but a generation to be listened to. And I think the best way to explain it is going to be just like what Greta did, right? Last year she was by herself, alone, sitting outside a climate strike, and this year we saw 4 million people. This is not going to be an overnight thing, and this is not going to be something that happens worldwide, but I think the more companies and organizations that come on will start to kind of tip the scales the other way to the side, and it's already happening, and there's plenty of campaigns out there already that exist like this, and there's plenty of companies that are already doing this kind of work. So that's why I challenge everyone in this room and beyond that the most important thing everyone can do when you're going to interview at a company or when you're interviewing at your own company, perhaps one of the values that's embedded is, what does our leadership look like? And are there young people just like there's women and all that other stuff that's so important these days to have really a unique body of leadership, so.
We had another question. I believe I saw another hand go up, or did I not? Yes, please, go ahead.
Hi, so my name is Alex, and I'm 20 years old. And when you gave the definitions of the teens that you worked with, I kind of identified with that, because I think that's what I'm trying to do, look around and find problems and solve them with my experience. I actually launched a project here at Unfinished last year, a clothing brand that's trying to change people's perception of Romania overseas. And my question is, it kind of goes back to mentoring. I know that when I have conversations with my friends, so people my age, often I tell them about what I do, and they like it a lot. They kind of show admiration, but I'm trying to get them involved, and they're like, no, I could never do what you're doing. You're special. That's not me. I could never do that. And what I'm trying to do is actually get them involved. Not necessarily in my project, but to speak up. To give their ideas and trying to share their thoughts and their projects maybe. And there's only a little proportion of my friends that are actually doing that. And I was wondering if you had any advice on how I could motivate, because you talked about mentors, from a different age, so a young person and an old person. But what about from young person to young person also? I think that's important.
Thank you so much for the question. Congratulations on your work.
Thank you.
Oh, God, such a loaded topic. Okay. Number one, I think the most important thing is to find young people to tap into first that share in your same value set, which is every young person in our community, like we said, has identified and reacted to something that faced them in their own communities, right? They were driven by something, felt by emotion. I don't have water. Why don't I have water, right? There's some conflict that I'm dealing with. I want to solve this conflict. There's something, I'm so obsessed with the prefrontal cortex. And young people under 25, because everyone in the past has always been, the kids, they're not fully developed yet. They make rash decisions. It's all about pleasure and response. And yes, that's true, but we had these stereotypes built way before the internet came out and way before they were actually using this cortex to actually make positive change. So like you said, you saw a problem. Your reaction was just immediately, I have to do something. In past and older generations, as a stereotype, our minds would say, there's a million problems in the world. I don't have time to do anything. Someone else is taking care of it. I have to go pick my kid up from school and help get myself a raise, right? And again, all this is a stereotype, so I don't like to segment that. But my point is that your generation is equipped with a mind that sits in a very unique place because your brain is not fully developed yet and because you have all these tools and resources and no responsibility. You have responsibilities, but nothing that's really holding you back to say this can't be solved, because you've also seen that prior generations have not done a good job at solving the problems.
You were saying that younger people have more impulsiveness.
There's more impulse, but we're seeing that impulse used for good, right? So this is the part that's really important. Not everybody your age is going to support what you do, because there's going to be some jealousy, or there's going to be some isolation, or there's going to be some bullying, or there's going to be people who don't want a part of it, and that is okay. So I would implore you to connect with young people who do have that drive and that impulse and that reaction, that have done these kinds of things, because there is a place of belonging. And everyone, no matter who you are, the number one thing about being a human is that we all want to belong. We want to find spaces that we feel ourselves in. And purpose is such a finite community that when you're driven to fix something, solve something, collaborate to make something better, that is everlasting. So what I would say to you is, from peer-to-peer standpoint, you can't convince anyone your age to jump on board with you. That's something that they have to feel inside them. But I would suggest that you connect with others who have done the same thing and taken the same risks. And also be mindful as a young person that there is a negative effect as well that we don't have time to go into, but you can't take on the whole world. And there's a lot of mental health around this topic of young people doing too much at a young age when all these other things are happening. So please understand that there is also very much truth in that. But it's most important, I think, when you can connect with a community and belong. And then any ideas you have or any support you need, whether it's mental health and getting through the pressures of the project and your normal growing up, you're supported, right, by people who are going through the same thing.
On that note, I think we will wrap up this session. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.